20 years of experience, and I'm an associate director in design in our office. We have in the LA studio, we have about 65 people, and we do projects of a wide variety of types and scales. So small projects, small interior projects, and then ranging upwards to adaptive reuse, mixed use, residential, commercial, civic and government, transportation, urban design and planning. And we also have in our office some structural engineers, some graphics and branding folks in our San Francisco office. We do have a full mechanical, electrical, and plumbing team in our Chicago office. And then, as I mentioned, we have urban design and planning. So we're a multidisciplinary firm, and we're excited to be here and share some of our experiences with you all, and we thank you for your interest. So with that, I'll turn it over to some of my other colleagues who are here joining. Kristen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I'm Kristen. I've been with SOM for 5 years. I graduated in 14 from the other Cal Poly. And I work on pretty large projects at SOM. We have a wide scale, like Kevin was talking about, but I'm really glad that we're able to spend the evening with you guys, and I'm really excited to hear your guys' fun Jeopardy questions. David, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm David Vong. I'm a designer and architect at SOM. I actually went to Cal Poly Pomona for my undergrad in landscape architecture, and then I got my master's at UCLA in architecture. I've been pretty fortunate. I've worked on a pretty wide range of projects, everything from like large scale master plans to libraries, city halls, even down to like light fixtures. So it's been a really great experience so far. Jad, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Jad Ismail here. I've been at SOM now for a little over a year and a half. But I actually interned at SOM for a summer before I joined full-time. So I'm happy to talk about that if that comes up, if you guys have any questions. I did my undergrad at Northeastern in Boston in architecture, and then I got my master's at Michigan, and I graduated last year. And yeah, I mean, I've been at SOM, just for a short period of time, but it's a great office, a great team, miss being in the office with everybody. So it's nice to see some faces of people that I don't work with on a day-to-day basis on this platform and spend the night with everyone. And Nico, finish us off.
Hi, I'm also probably one of the newer people in the office. I graduated from Cal Poly Flow last year and started working at SOM right after. Since I started, I've pretty much been on the same project the whole time, which is now in construction, which is really exciting. And I actually got introduced to a lot of people in the office during the winter shadowship program that SOM puts on every year. It was previously just a women's initiative program for women in architecture to come see the LA office, or actually, I guess it happens in every office, but to get to know SOM for a couple weeks over winter break. And that put me in touch with a bunch of people in the office. And then I was lucky enough to be offered a position after I graduated. But this year, actually, I don't know if we're going to touch on this, but the shadowship program is being expanded. So it'll be hosted by the Women's Initiative, as well as our NOMA group in our office and our Pride group. We're kind of all hosting it together. So that'll be an opportunity that hopefully some of you guys will consider applying to if you're interested in spending some more time getting to know SOM.
Yeah, it's a really great program. And we're going to debut it at the NOMA conference next week or the week after. So if you guys are attending in that, you can hear about it, or else I'll definitely share the information with Henry and the team so he can distribute to you all. But yes, please apply.
James?
I think
Okay,
that's it.
cool.
That's it for us.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. It's so nice seeing faces we've never seen before, you know, out of what we're typically seeing. So let's move into game night, guys. Marco, if you could share your screen.
Oh wow, the music.
Oh my
Okay.
God, so fun.
This is great. I'm not smart enough to actually be on Jeopardy, so this is dream come true.
Hey everybody, if you don't know me, I'm James. I'm the event coordinator of CPP NOMAS. So if you weren't here last month, we are going to be playing the NOMAS version of Jeopardy, SOM edition. So the way that this game is going to run down, we're going to have a wheel. And that wheel is going to dictate what question we're going to be asking. And we're going to be asking some really hard-hitting questions for the SOM members. So I hope you guys are ready. So Marco, hit that button. So for $200, what other opportunities are there for students who are exploring careers other than architecture?
We just jump in.
Yeah, anybody?
Is anyone keeping
Oh.
track of points? Because we're pretty competitive.
Sure, yeah, we could see whoever jumps
No,
in.
just
I can jump in on this. I think there's plenty of different opportunities that you can explore outside of architecture if you studied architecture. Personally, I know of people who have went into like shoe design. They work at Nike, and they're actually recruited like straight out of school from architecture school to work at Nike. And there's others that transition into development and project management. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can take, not to mention like film. That's also another kind of popular avenue.
Yeah, like set design.
Yep.
Or actual production if you're into computer animation.
And then real quick, if anybody in the audience has a follow-up question they would like to ask, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask it. So let's go into the next question.
Actually, I had a follow-up question.
Oh yeah, what's up?
Real quick, sorry. So that was actually my question. I wrote that one. And I was wondering, like, if I were to practice something other than just architecture, like, is having an architecture degree enough to just put you into work in like another, like set design or shoe design? Like, would I have to take supplementary, like courses or education to be like considered qualified for that kind of job?
I would probably say, well, like for shoe design, I know that a lot of the skills that are involved within it, at least in conversation with like the friends that I have working there, are very much the same. And it's not really about the skill sets. It's really about the process of thinking and like thinking creatively. And that's like something that I think transitions really well to like these other fields like shoe design or like set design, for instance. You know, it's being curious and being able to think, like creatively think. I think that's what's important.
Yeah, and then finding the right internship is also very valuable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Marco,
Hit
hit
that
that
button.
button. 5. So for $200, do you see the work from home trend staying?
It's a really good question. I'll just jump in and I think at least in some capacity, we're probably going to see a lot more flexibility in our working schedules. When we do go back to the office, I think there will still be some people that choose to work from home at least a portion of the time. So I do see that being an integral part of our working environment in the future. I think this transition happened so quickly. It's really interesting because it's something that we've been talking about in the profession and just in general, just in the working world at large, with the internet and all the tools that we have at our disposal. For a long time, people have been saying, do we really need the office anymore? But then just with everything that happened with the pandemic, it was almost overnight when we shifted to a work from home 100%. And we've been able to, there has been some challenges, no doubt, but I think we found our stride, and we're learning a lot of new tools, and I think we found it to be very effective. And I think there are a lot of aspects that a lot of people do enjoy, and so I think it will continue to be a part of our working culture.
And just kind of a fun fact on as far as SOM, I guess there have been some polls among all of the employees as far as if people feel just as productive at home, and a lot of people have said that they feel even more productive at home. And so I think that's really causing leadership and HR to reconsider maybe some of the policies around flexible working, as it's been such a surprisingly efficient experience for everyone.
Yeah, I guess from a student standpoint, I can say that it works. I'm not saying I enjoy it, but it is something that's possible.
Totally.
Let's move on to the next question. Okay, Marco, hit that button. All right. So 1 for 200. What do you miss the most about working at the SOM office?
I think for me, it's definitely the spontaneous interactions. Just when you see a colleague coming into the office in the morning, riding up in the elevator together, and just chatting about what's happening on your project or what did you do over the weekend. That spontaneity doesn't exist anymore. And so, but there's a different type of spontaneity, which is, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call together. And a lot of the Zoom calls we have are related to project meetings and all staff meetings. And if you're on a different committee within the office or you're involved in something else, you might have Zoom meetings related to that. But then, you know, you find there are times when people organize Zoom happy hours or things that are more casual. So it's kind of, I was talking about it last night with I was gonna say my colleague who works here at home with me, but my girlfriend, she's also an architect, and it's those things, we don't have those spontaneous interactions, but we have a different type of interaction. So it's just kind of a shift, I think, and I don't want to like get too nostalgic about the way things used to be, but it's just kind of like adapting to the new way that things are and kind of getting the most benefit out of that. Sure,
Yeah,
others have thoughts on that too.
I'll add a little bit more to that. I totally agree with what Kevin's saying. It's like, it's definitely like the kind of spontaneous interactions. And like, I think that's like the most interesting aspect of like studio, you know, like professionally and academically, is that like, you know, there's obviously people in your studio, like in school, that works from home, and there's others that works together in the studio. And there's a different, I feel like the projects end up differently like when that happens. And it's because you get, I think, like, you know, random input, and like that random input puts you into this position where you might not arrive at without like that kind of interaction. And I think that's like something that I probably miss most, like working in the office, you know, like being able to turn around, speak to Kevin, ask him like what he thinks of like what I'm working on, and then, you know, him giving giving his input, like things like that is something that I think I miss.
I also miss just walking down the hall of the office and seeing what people are working on, like seeing process diagrams and renderings pinned up on the wall. And we have like bi-weekly town halls where we get a little snippet sometimes of what people, or what, like the development of certain projects and what people have been up to. But I find that working from home, you definitely work more of in a silo, at least with your team and what your project is, and not, you don't really have that casual like brush against or seeing what other people have been doing in the office. So, I mean, just I guess to piggyback off of like the last question, I think there are pros and cons of working from home. I think we're talking about a lot of the cons right now. So I guess it's just another example of how when we do go into this like new normal of like working from home and then in the future doing some sort of combination of the two, it'll probably there are pros and cons of both, I guess is my point.
I miss the view of our beautiful 36th floor office.
That's a good point, yeah.
Let's move on to the next question. Okay, Marco, hit that button. All right. 5 for 400. Will COVID-19 slow or change the process of re-urbanization?
I think that question's pretty interesting when we consider downtown. I don't know if you guys are familiar with downtown, but that's where our office is. And I'm just going to speak anecdotally, but when I go visit downtown now, there's still plenty of people on the street. But then I've heard that, it's harder to, they're having a harder time renting lofts down there and businesses are going out. So it's interesting to think about that question in context of the office and how we used to contribute to that urban environment on a more regular basis. And when we consider how, in this new normal, we may not be doing that on a more regular basis, I think that it will sort of slow or significantly alter people's perception of downtown. Kevin, you were going to say something.
Yeah, that's some good points there, Kristen. And I think it's such a challenging question. And right now, it's hard to forecast what might be the outcome. But I do think it's going to change strategies, change the way we think about designing buildings and the way that buildings are used. But ultimately, I think people are social creatures and they want to be together, they want to interact. So this is also new. If you think about it, it's just been since March here or January when all of this really came about. So it's only been 10 months. And that's just kind of a blip on the radar when you think about the time that it takes for a city to really mature and grow. So ultimately, I think maybe there's a slow period now, but I think that once we figure out how to negotiate this and different strategies and treatments and vaccines become more available, I do think that cities are going to continue to grow and be very dynamic places. And cities as we know them need to change anyway based on things such as sustainability, resilience, and so the models of cities as we know them now are not going to be the cities that we know 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And that was the case already before this pandemic, but the pandemic just layers on another level, I think, of kind of transformation that we'll see happen in our cities. So I think there's kind of a temporary slowing, but I think over the long run, I do think that cities and urban environments will continue to grow and be very dynamic places for human collaboration, knowledge, and economy.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, Kristen. Just to add to that a bit, I also agree. I think it's maybe a little too early to say that, re-urbanization is slowing. Like, I'm curious what will happen in, 5 years' time, for instance. But I think what's interesting is that I think people and companies are realizing that, we don't necessarily need to live as dense or as closely packed as we do currently. Like, there's people that are working for one corporation or one organization that are all over the country, and they don't need to necessarily be in one building to do that. And I think that's a really interesting model to think about, how to formulate new cities. And then on top of that, I think people are coming up with like pretty interesting strategies on how to, repopulate like dense areas, like all through downtown Los Angeles. There's streets now that are closed, or like portions of streets that are closed, so that people can repopulate restaurants and things like that. And you sort of realize that maybe you don't need as much of that infrastructure that we currently have, and we can use it for other communal ideas, which I think is really interesting for an architect or like an urban designer. Really different way to think about what cities could be.
That was really insightful. I really liked all the answers that you gave. That was beautiful. So let's go into the next question.
Marco, hit
that
button.
Okay, 400. What is one advice you would give your younger self after graduating?
Finish your portfolio, probably.
Chill
I mean,
out.
well, that too, yeah. I mean, the one thing that I think I mean, it wasn't that long ago, I guess, but I'd probably just tell myself to, like, when looking for a job, like if that's how we're framing this question, lean into what you're really interested in, and like really try to find the right position that suits your interests, or the right office that will give you the opportunity to do that. Because I mean, I know that things are different now, because I think jobs are not as readily available, perhaps, at least in the architecture field. But I think when I was looking for work, I'll say for like after my undergraduate in particular, I was applying to everything that I could find. Like whatever posting was going up, I was just applying for it. And I think when you're really young, I think it's important to get experience. So I think I wouldn't say that was a bad idea, but I think in hindsight, I would probably try to narrow down my search to things that I was really interested in, or offices where the work or the office type or the size or even like the city that it was in was particularly of interest. Because I think what's important about internships and about jobs when you're young is that they're as much a growing opportunity for you as they are for like just having like the work experience under your belt. It's really it's a great opportunity to find these jobs and to work, but as long as you know what you're actually getting out of it and you have a certain agenda for what you want to get out of the internship, I think you'll come out of it a little bit enriched and know after that if you want to continue in that same trajectory or if you maybe want to go in a different route. We talked a little bit earlier about looking at things outside of architecture, and I know that there's that was a certain crux that I had when I was fresh out of school. Was like, is this the right path for me? And you kind of try a few things out. Like I worked at a fabrication studio for a bit just to try it, and I enjoyed it, but I realized that it was more limiting than what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think just use any job opportunity as a learning opportunity and make sure that you're actually taking something away from the experience before that you can apply to your career moving forward.
I feel like to bounce off what Jad said and to phrase it maybe a different way or with different perspective, I think also the fear of like failing or like making the wrong decision was for me quite paralyzing. And really there's no bad experience because at least you know you don't want to do that anymore. So yeah, it's like, you know, consider what you want to do after graduation, but there's also, it's not the biggest decision of your life. Architecture is the biggest long game there is, and so, you know, if you twist and turn, it's all part of the ride that you already signed up for. So go into shoe design if you're not digging it.
Also, I'll add on to that. You know, you're going to get that first job. You're going to go into that, but don't. I would say, in addition to that, keep in touch with your friends, your classmates. Find a mentor. And in other words, find ways to get involved or get at least touch on experiences that are outside of just what your job is, because you guys are going to have a great network of all your classmates. You guys are all going to be working at different places. You can have a happy hour at a different office, and you can go in and see what they're working on, or, you know, have coffee with a friend who works at a shoe design place and pick their brain about what they're doing. Just try to always be trying to get as much information as you can. And it doesn't have to be just from work experience only, but it can be from friends, classmates, mentors, things like that, because you never know when you're going to have that conversation or that kernel of an idea that really piques your interest and really motivates you. So just try to keep your spread your net wide in that regard.
You know, one more thing to add to this question. You know, probably one thing that I would advise my younger self is, you know, not to be afraid to like ask questions. Like if you're in a meeting, you know, with your colleagues, or, you know, you might be like the smallest person in the room or the youngest person in the room, like it doesn't really matter, you know, like being curious is very important in our profession, and learning how to like ask questions and not being afraid to ask questions is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Before I say what I'm about to say, everyone is free to unmute themselves and join me for this one if you guys want to. Okay. Marco!
Hit that
button.
Okay, 600. How does SOM support recent graduates struggling with debt?
Like generally, or the ones that work at SOM?
We have
ones
paid
that work-
internships.
I mean, generally, I mean, no. I mean, it's like with probably like all architecture firms. Yeah, I mean, you get paid, and that's like what helps with the debt, I guess.
There's an exchange of services, and you get money.
There's the SOM Foundation scholarship, but that's for
Yeah.
current students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a no.
If a firm answers this with a good answer, hit me up so I can forward it to HR.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
Give us ideas. I mean, I'd be curious to hear from the person who asked this question if they had any specific ideas of ways that an office could support graduates.
Anybody want to claim this question? It's not. I guess they were just as curious about this as you guys are.
Yeah, this is it's a really good question. I mean, we all know that student debt is a huge issue for architecture students and for many students coming out of school, going into the workforce. I think as a company, Jad mentioned scholarships. There are different scholarships that our SOM Foundation offers. So you can look into our website and find out about those. A lot of those are related to like kind of like specific research topics that people are interested in. And, you know, hopefully in the future, this is something that there will be larger societal and cultural and economic shifts to help alleviate the burden. And it won't be so much individual companies helping out people as it will be, you know, larger fiscal policy. But that's all speculation at this point. But it's an important question to have at the forefront of our minds.
Maybe something else worth noting is that entry-level positions at SOM are paid hourly. And so, like, I am paid hourly, and so any overtime I work, I get paid time and a half for. And so that's definitely helpful for recent grads, especially if you're struggling with debt. And it makes it so that if I work a 60-hour week, which doesn't happen all the time, but I would get paid overtime for 20 extra hours, which is awesome. And I know most firms just are salary from the very beginning, so that's definitely a perk, I think.
Good point.
Let's move on to the next question.
I want to get round or column 6 bonus questions.
Perfect, because I was going to read it that way we have question 6 questions coming in. Okay, so for 200 for question 6, who is the best at karaoke?
I hear Kevin is really good.
In another life, I was a karaoke singer, yes. There's pictures somewhere on the office server floating around that Carlos will pull up every once in a while and send out to people.
Are you going to give us a little show?
That's a different Zoom meeting, Chad, and it has a password, so.
What's your song, Kevin?
Oh man, there's so many. They're not just one. There's so many.
He does a medley.
I know what our next happy hour is going to be.
Zoom karaoke hour. Now we're talking.
And then I actually had a follow-up question for this. So does SOM typically hold like SOM sponsored events for team building, or was it typically like, hey, we're going to go to this guy's house, play video games, come over, or like what was like your interaction with like you guys growing up?
We have an annual holiday party, and then depending on your team, you might have celebratory drinks and appetizers after a deadline. But I think something that we haven't really touched on and that makes our office unique and has kept me here for 5 years, I guess, is that everyone's very lovely. Like, we're all lovely humans. So somehow we find a way to hang out and talk. And in my opinion, I think we're pretty good at maintaining relationships like outside of work as well.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, there's some kind of grassroots events that do happen in the office. Well, back when we were in the office, we would have a Friday breakfast every morning where different pairs of people each Friday would bring in a breakfast that represented either their cultural background, or if it was a special holiday week of some kind, Chinese New Year or something of that sort. So that was always something I looked forward to, was the Friday breakfast. We had a ping pong tournament at one point that was organized within the office kind of after we moved into our new space. Some avid ping pong players organized that, so they also won the competition. So
don't forget
really
the puzzles,
fair.
Kevin.
Rigged.
That's right. We have a common area with puzzles, and it seems like there's always a jigsaw puzzle out on the table, and you'll see people kind of randomly putting pieces in there, and by the end of the week it's completed. But we also do things like a First Thursday, and Jad and Kristen just organized a great First Thursday discussion. I guess that was last Thursday with a gentleman who had a very interesting perspective on Black aesthetic in architecture, and those are events. So we try to bring in outside designers, maybe architects, maybe not, and kind of give presentations to the office on what they're working on, what they're thinking about, and then we engage with kind of a discussion or question and answer afterwards. So in addition to kind of the office sponsored events, the yearly holiday and summer parties, we try to have these more informal get-togethers as well. And if your team is lucky enough, like Kristen was saying, you'll go to karaoke after a deadline, or just drinks.
We also have a women's initiative in our office. It's like an organization for looking for gender equity in the profession, and they host a lot of events on their own. Like even virtually, we've done like show and tells and like a guess who sort of thing virtually as an office. And when we were back in the office, they organized hikes and all sorts of stuff. So there's always something happening.
Let's go to the next question. Marco, hit that.
Hit that button.
Hit it.
Okay, so design for 200. What are some of the design initiatives that SOM or you has been thinking about to address racial and economic disparity?
Jad, you should take this one.
I should?
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk from the perspective of NOMA. I think in working in NOMA, I think we've acknowledged that the racial disparity in the profession is deep-rooted. It doesn't start and end in the profession. It goes all the way back. And so a lot of what we've been doing is outreach, and that starts early on, like not just at the university level, but doing things at the high school and middle school level. Kristen actually helped coordinate the project pipeline this past year with SoCal NOMA, and that's a great opportunity for youth to get involved in the profession and like get their feet wet in what architecture is, because a lot of young people don't actually know what architects do. I mean, I know I didn't. So I mean, even like I have an older sister who went into architecture, and I don't think only because of her involvement and going to school was I able to kind of give perspective on what she did and what an architect would do, and what, how I could see myself as an architect in the future. So there's that. It's looking at outreach. It's looking at things in the office so that we have better vocabulary and knowledge about what racial disparity in architecture looks like. Like Kevin mentioned, we are trying to host a regular First Thursday lecture series that would happen monthly, where we would invite speakers from outside of our office to talk about their work or talk about whatever is important to them. And those are people within architecture, but also looking at developers and maybe even something outside of the field totally. What else is there?
Well, I think to build upon that, sorry to throw you under the bus there, Jad.
No, it's okay. Piggyback off of it.
We're building partnerships with people within the built environment. There are developers, there are nonprofits. We're trying to get inspired by those people and by other offices that have done this kind of work in the past. I think that at SOM and within architecture generally, it's not just us, but there is quite a period of self-reflection and reckoning in what our contribution has been to the racial and economic disparity of which you speak. And it's a long process to sort of undo, redo, learn how to think differently. And, you know, it starts in school, so I'm really happy that you guys are considering these topics. And when you join whichever profession you choose to, I just really hope that you can sort of continue to bring up these points, because if they're not talked about, nothing happens.
And I'll also add that when we talk about SOM, we're not only talking about the LA office. Like, these are things that we're doing firm-wide. And we have regular meetings with other NOMA leaders and other offices to hear what they're doing and try to collaborate as often as possible, so that I think we're aware of the impact we can have alone, but collectively as SOM, we have even more strength because we're a global practice. So just using our platform to do what we can at a larger level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a multi-pronged approach, and all of the things that Jed and Kristen mentioned are critical components. You know, making sure that we're addressing the issue of pipeline and how can we help expand the pipeline of people that are coming into the architecture field. So that's one step. The projects and the work that we do, what clients do we work with? Are there different organizations that we can start to work with? So there's been a lot of work going into that. And then also internally, you know, how do we think about the work that we're designing, and what are, you know, are there different questions that we need to ask ourselves as we design buildings, as we design large-scale master plans, as we design civic buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings. There's certain conventions and things that have just been developed over a long period of time, and those all need to be called into question. And so it's definitely a multifaceted thing, and I think the idea of having an ongoing dialogue and constant sort of evolution and learning will be very important to all of these things as we go forward.
I think this is a really good way to end this segment. Before we move on, I do want to announce the winner of tonight. Okay, so the winner of CPP NOMAS Deputy SOM Edition is Marco!
All right.
Good job, Marco.
Congrats, Marco.
Thanks, Marco.
Okay.
Great spinning.
We're just gonna.
You know, Marco, I don't think I've ever heard you speak, and I've been on several calls with you now.
Hello.
Okay, so
That's all you got, Kristen.
to end today's meeting, we're just gonna jump into our SOM Q&A. So if anybody in the audience has any pressing questions they've been dying to ask SOM for as long as they've known about them, please do so.
I have a question. Hi all, my name is Ghazi. Thank you for all being here. I guess, I mean, I've experienced this. Some of the fourth and fifth year students experienced this. It's basically when you kind of get an internship over the summer, then you kind of turn it to probably a part-time job during school time. But you kind of feel like you want to explore working at another place. But at the same time, you have a gut feeling like, oh, should I stay or should I leave? Or should I take the risk, especially if I have like another year or two before I graduate? So what do you think about it?
That's a good question, Ghazi. Thanks for that. I'll just jump in. I think you kind of need to ask yourself the question, are you still learning something there? Is it still, you know, what are your goals? Where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself in 1 year, in 5 years, 10 years? And is what you're engaging with on that job, is it propelling you towards those goals? Is it teaching, are you still being able to get new information and get new experiences out of it? I think if the answer is yes to those things, then it's probably good to maybe go with that and keep that learning experience going. But if you feel like you've gotten kind of as much out of it as you can, and you're not really learning anything new, or they're not giving you new opportunities, maybe then it's time to seek another opportunity to really expand your knowledge base and your experience.
Thank you.
I have a question for you guys. So after going to school for about five plus years, how was that transition from school to work? Like, was it smooth? Were you guys like anxious about it? Like, how did that work out for you guys?
I'll jump in on this one. You know, for me, honestly, it was pretty smooth, but I think it really depends on the office that you joined. And it just so happens that like when I joined this SOM office, it was still quite small, and my experience at school, like in graduate school, the class was also pretty small. So like that transition was pretty fluid in that sense. Like it still had a very kind of strong studio culture in that way. But I could see how if you jumped from like a small like academic environment, like a small class academically, and jumping into like a very large corporation, that could be pretty jarring. But I think for me, it was pretty seamless, the transition. All of the work that I did in my last year of school, or like throughout school, translated pretty well and like to what I was doing my first year working professionally. Like I was still doing a lot of, you know, modeling, a lot of design work, a lot of rendering, a lot of like representational work. And those are most of the things that you'd probably be doing like straight out of school regardless. So the transition is pretty seamless, I would say.
I think one of the things that I've noticed is, at least when talking with my friends during that, like, you know, couple years after school, is that, you know, the skills and the programs and whatnot, if you're down to learn and you're curious and interested, those things happen by themselves. But it's kind of the office culture and the connections that really helps a person like make it through that. I think it's kind of an awkward time. It's exciting, but it's awkward. And so I think that's one of the major players in the equation as well. And I say that to you, hoping that you guys can sort of focus on finding like mentors or finding colleagues who you can connect with, because I think that's what really like helps you balance it all in the end.
Nice, thank you. And
I think, oh, sorry. I was just one last thing. I was gonna say, when I was in undergrad, at least, I did very few group projects. Like just the way my curriculum was set up, we didn't do many things with other designers. Like it was just us alone designing everything by yourself and doing all the work by yourself. And so, I mean, that teaches you to take ownership of your work and really to like think about things all the way through. But in transitioning into like the professional workplace where you have to work with others, I think a lot of people in my program struggled because they were so used to making all the decisions themselves and didn't understand how to compromise. So I would recommend I don't know how Pomona's program is situated, but if you do have team projects, to like really use those as opportunities to learn how other people work and learn how to compromise and work with somebody else, and not try to steamroll the project, because that rarely happens successfully in the real world. And if not, then try to find competitions outside of your curriculum where you can work with another student and do something together, because I think that's an important skill that they didn't at least teach me when I was in school. So I highly recommend doing that.
Awesome, thank you. And we do have 2 questions from the audience. So the first one coming up from Preston. Is there any recommendations you guys have for getting an internship as an undergrad?
Are you asking like in general or?
Yeah, like just any tips, any helpful, like either finding firms that are hiring or just how to get hired quicker or like more effectively, I guess.
I would say use your network. Like every job that I got, except for my first internship at SOM, was because I knew somebody, whether it was like a professor or a coworker or like a friend of mine knew like somebody in an office. Just like using that network gets you a lot further than you would alone. And I think when I was first out of school, I was really stubborn about that. I was like, oh, I'll just get in on my own merit. Like I'm a good designer, I'm a hard worker. I don't need to like ask people for a shot, but it gets you a lot further, a lot faster. So I would, yeah, just use your network. Don't be stubborn like I was.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jed. I think just to reiterate that, you know, we get a lot of resumes that come in through our website and from all over the country, and so you know there's hundreds. But when a resume and a portfolio comes to our desk that's from somebody that I know and that says, hey, you should take a look at this student, those are the students that we look at first, those that are brought to our attention by someone that we know. And so that's super important, the point that Jad just made. You know, ask your faculty members, your studio critic, your professors for your different seminars, because they know people in the field, they know different offices. So ask them, where's a good place to work? Where can I find good experience? Ask your friends, where are they working? I remember I had a summer internship once. It was actually my first summer in LA. It was a small office, and he had just landed a big project. So he needed 5 people to build a bunch of big models. So I was able to get 3 other classmates that I knew to come work for the summer there at the same time. So just use your network, stay connected to people that you know, and people at all levels, because you just never know where that opportunity is going to come from.
And then our other audience question. So in terms of going to graduate school, how much more weight does a master's have in terms of employment opportunities compared to just having your bachelor's?
I totally want to answer this question because I did not go to grad school. I think Nico can maybe contribute to that too. In my opinion, you should only go to grad school if there's something specific that you're passionate about and want to explore, if you're coming from a 5-year program. Otherwise, I think you should give yourself the time to practice a little bit to find that passion and drive. I think that there might be, like, if I wanted to teach, if I wanted to, you know, go into publications, like there's certainly advantageous elements of me going to grad school, which is like something I'm still considering in a conceptual level, but at this time I haven't found it to be necessary for employment or for my professional development, at least at SOM. Maybe someone who did go to grad school should speak up next.
I mean, I took time off between undergrad and grad school. I think everybody should. I think it's important to work a little bit before jumping back into the ring, before at least to know for sure that it's something that you really want to do, because my undergrad had an option to continue on for another year, and so my undergrad was a 5-year program, and if you stayed for another year, you would also get your master's. So I had a lot of my classmates just continue on because they wanted to just get the master's and keep going, but I took 3 years off before getting my master's because I had never worked in an office for a long period of time, and for me, having that experience was more important than rushing and getting the degree. So there's that. I think take a break is important. But also to Kristen's point, when I went to grad school, I had something really specific that I wanted to study, and I wanted to do for my thesis, and so I went for that specific reason. So yeah, just don't go to grad school because you think you have to go to grad school, I guess. Only go if it really makes sense for like your career path and your interests. You can have a strong, lucrative professional career without a master's degree.
Yeah, I agree with both Kristen and Jad. Just a couple other points. There's a couple ways to come at it. Licensure is one. You guys, you have a 5-year degree, you have your BArch, so you'll be able to, once you fulfill your internship requirement and pass the AREs, you'll be able to get licensed as an architect. So that's good. It won't be required for you to go to graduate school. My undergrad program was only 4 years, so in order to become a licensed architect, I knew that I would need to eventually do my master's degree, so I did that. But Kristen touched on a little point about like, what are your future career goals? Is it more oriented towards practice, or is it maybe oriented towards academia? But also something that I learned was, where do you want to work and where do you want to be practicing architecture? Because some schools are maybe have a bigger network of alumni out there that are all over the place, and some schools, their alumni tend to be more concentrated. For example, I went to school at University of Michigan. There's you can go in any city and there's always an alumni there. I went to graduate school on the East Coast at Yale, and what I didn't realize at the time was that it's a very New York-centric school. I would say probably 90% of all the people that go to Yale go to New York City to practice. And so if you're practice oriented and not academically oriented to teach, you have a very strong network when you stay in that area of the country. So that's something else to consider, I think, is where you might want to find yourself geographically. Cal Poly, I think, is a school that is definitely very strong in California. I know we have a lot of Cal Poly folks, as we noted, a couple on this call, and many more in our LA office. But in our San Francisco office, we also have a number of Cal Poly graduates. And in other offices, we have a Chicago, New York office as well. And I think there's some Cal Poly graduates that find their way to those offices as well. But if you're interested in going to Europe and working in Europe, I know some people maybe try to find a graduate program in Europe to go to as a way to get them, get a foot in the door and make connections to do something like that. So I think it depends on what your long-term goals are, where you might want to be, and if you want to focus on practicing or becoming an academic, teaching maybe, or something to that effect. So there's a lot of different, I think, layers to that decision to consider.
Totally agree with everything Kevin just said. And as a person who went to New York after my Cal Poly degree, it's a different Cal Poly, but we say it the same way. It was admittedly quite difficult to have a network out there. The reason I was able to get a job at SOM in New York was because there was a associate, Frank Mahan, who went to Cal Poly, and he loves Cal Poly and wanted more Cal Poly people at SOM. But if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have gotten an interview in the first place. So yeah, firsthand experience that East Coast, there's a lot less name recognition in the East Coast.
All right, guys, thank you. Before I close this, I had one last question. Have any of you participated in the NOMA National Conference? And if you have, can you maybe give us a little bit of insight on what to expect?
I don't think anyone on this call has participated, but I think several of us are going to participate. So we'll see you there. The digital format's going to be really interesting. I'm really excited. There's an expo. I don't know how many of you guys are attending, but there's an expo on Thursday or Friday afternoon.
It's Friday.
And thanks, Chad. And as I understand it, that's where a lot of offices and universities will be like available for dropping by. I have no idea how this is going to work, but I'm super excited to see how it happens.
All right. If anybody's interested, email me for more info on the conference, and I'll fill you in. But before we end this, can everybody turn on their cameras and just give a big thank you to SOM, please? And we're also going to take a screenshot. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Good luck
everyone.
with your studio.
Thank you.
Thank
You guys
you.
are doing great.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate all the really great questions. Look forward to seeing you guys again in the future sometime.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
All
Bye,
right,
everyone.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you for coming.